time for the Albion Mag Radio Show.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks to the prepubescent Michael Jackson there and his rat friend, and Nick Suttle for his serial killers. You are listening to the Albion Mag Radio Show on Saturday the 29th of September. We are live now for an hour on 1BTN, available online, DAB Digital, why can I never say that, and 101.4 FM if you're in the area. Follow us on social media and tweet us if you've got anything to say about recent events and occurrences relating to the Albion on Twitter, at TAM Radio Show, and we have a thread on North Stand Chat. You can even text 1BTN, followed by your message, 81400. We're on air, as I say, till midday. Get in touch. Welcome back. My name's Leon Cox, standing in for Dean Kilford this week, and returning guest, my friend, Albion fan of 3 decades or more, it's Paul Drewitt.
Good morning, Leon.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And shout out to my friends Nick and Lisa, who won't be listening, but they're getting married this afternoon. Got a nice day for that.
Congratulations, Nick and Lisa.
Yeah. Nick absolutely despises football and everything to do with it. He definitely won't be listening. Morning also to social media doyen Tom Stewart.
Good morning, Leon. How are you?
Yeah, all right. Cheers. And Tom, for regular listeners, a recent arrival to the family, creating havoc.
Oh, yeah, just projectile vomiting from time to time.
Oh, nice.
Not from me, yet from him.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's contagious. And Tom this week has popped up a Twitter poll talking about changing the lineups and using the second string.
Yeah.
You got to play at full strength.
Yeah, well, we'll preview the Manchester City game in full later, and yeah, I mean we've already said to each other off the air, like, we don't even know how you approach a game like this anymore. There's such a, even though I think this is probably the best Brighton and Hove Albion squad there's ever been, it still feels like we are such a long way short of that sort of standard. But one person who's been brought in potentially to sort of address our long-term efforts in games such as this and the overall strength of the squad and the development. Probably the biggest news from the club this week was Dan Ashworth's appointment as technical director. He doesn't actually take up the post until spring 2019. Dan Ashworth is, according to his Wikipedia, one of the creators of the England DNA, an elite player development plan which aims to help create winning senior teams in the men's and the women's game. There's some controversy surrounding him because he was in his position as the FA's technical director during the Mark Sampson affair and sacking. All sorts of horrible stories coming out around his behaviour inappropriate with female players and racist commentary. Who did I say?
No. I was going to say that's Mark Sampson rather than Dan Ashworth.
That's Mark Sampson. Yes. Yeah. Good. Very, very good to make that clear. But however, because Dan Ashworth was in that role at the time, former board member Dame Heather Rabatz said just under a year ago that Dan Ashworth's position was untenable. He stayed in post for another year, and I don't know how much. He should be sort of taken to task for his role or lack of maybe inaction in that whole scene. Henry Winter on Twitter, the Times football correspondent and venerable journalist, of course, says Dan Ashworth did a great job with development teams at the FA and building framework for England. Strange time to leave with teams prospering and SGP booming, but good luck to Ashworth at BHAFC. Wanted club return and didn't enjoy the deserved public scrutiny during a Luco controversy. So what's your feelings on this appointment, Paul?
Obviously, I think, it's a little bit of a coup for the football club. It certainly seems to be the way that Tony Bloom likes to go about his business, is by, quietly looking for key members of staff who are going to really make a difference to how the club is run. I think, obviously, Paul Barber is an exceptional CEO and one kind of coveted by other clubs, and I'm sure Tony kind of make sure he's paid well enough to kind of remain. And I think he's probably been looking around for a while to kind of fill this role. looking at the investment he's made across all levels of player development. You look at Lancing, you look at the kind of teams that are in place, on the male and the female side of things. You look at the other teams that are there that kind of represent some of the underrepresented kind of sections of society as well. So, it kind of makes sense to have someone here who's going to kind of knit that all together. And I think, it sounds a bit corporate maybe, but having an ethos or, a DNA is certainly something that, will help with the success of the club. So, I can't profess to know too much about these kind of technical roles that now exist in football. But, track record in the England setup looks pretty impressive on paper. Lots of success, and that's coming through at all levels. I think sometimes I wonder about the rigidity of these systems. You look at Gareth Southgate, and you get the feeling that he'll only kind of pick players that have maybe come through that process, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for innovation, for want of a better word, or to throw something different in the mix. And I think we felt that a bit when Glenn Murray was scoring a lot of goals last season, and maybe it was pie in the sky to think that he could ever get an England call up, but he was certainly performing as one of the better England strikers at the time, and Dunk as well. And you just wonder whether the process, the system that was in place at the FA meant that they were never going to get a look in because they hadn't kind of progressed through all the levels. But having said that, it seems like a great piece of recruitment from Tony and Paul, and I'm sure it's going to have a very positive effect on the long-term kind of development plans of the club.
So my concerns are twofold. One was the fact that, exactly as you say, like Brighton is a club known for being progressive in certain ways, and the fact that this guy's come from a rather unfortunate and unpleasant situation at the FA, which was exactly about places, infrastructures, organisations still being sort of in the dark ages in certain ways. And I'm not saying that he was personally directly responsible for that, but it was on his watch kind of thing. And then the other thing that struck me, I'm sure we've all been in a job where a layer of management has been injected in what seemed to be a functioning organisation, and it can cause and create resentment among existing staff, and it can create a lack of clarity in what roles are. So, for instance, we have an established and in recent years very successful, seemingly recruitment team. Now, where does this slot in? And I got to say, I thought now. Chris Hughton's always super cool, and he always addresses the press in exactly the same way. But I thought his use of language was quite interesting when he was asked about this. He said, I believe the official line is, when asked to describe what the role is, which rang alarm bells for me. And then he said, if you are going to have one of these, you want it to be somebody who's experienced in the role. Both of those things said to me slightly that maybe his nose was out of joint, or am I reading too much into that?
Interesting. It certainly sounds like the language, wasn't necessarily the company line, but I don't know. Maybe we're looking for something that isn't there. From what I understand of the role, the day-to-day running of the first team affairs and the coaching and all of that stuff still sits with Chris and his team. I must admit, I didn't memorise the org structure, but I think Paul Barber kind of alluded to it in his press release this week. And was it that Wyn Stanley and his kind of recruitment team will report into Dan Ashworth? I can't quite recall. I probably should have looked that up. But, I think Chris is modern enough in his thinking and his understanding of how football has evolved to be okay with this. I don't know what impact Ashworth will have on player recruitment, and I think that's probably something that Hughton's probably more immediately concerned about, rather than an ethos or a DNA of how kind of under 10s, under 11s, under 12s and things are kind of feeding up through the pyramid in the club. I think I saw someone somewhere writing about it seems a strange time for Ashworth to come in just after the transfer window. I think he's coming in kind of March time or something like that. But then again, reading what Barber had said, it didn't feel like Ashworth was going to have a great say in recruitment anyway. It's more about building a structure, building a process to bring players through the club. So I think Paul Winstanley, who's obviously done a great job in the last few years, I think that role will remain unaffected and will continue, hopefully, to deliver the quality of signings that there's been. So.
Yeah, well, we shall see. Time will tell and all that good stuff. Bahram Kayal, we mentioned him earlier as a likely pick for today. I definitely felt when he did come on, we'll get onto the Tottenham game shortly, he definitely had a statement to make. Whether he knew that his I assume he would have known that his contract renewal was potentially up. He did absolutely bust a gut when he came on, I thought, and really did a lot to kind of change the game. My immediate thought was that as much as I love Davey as a kind of real classy Rolls Royce kind of a player, he's not necessarily a player to break up the pattern of the other team's play. He's very nice when you've got possession and are spraying the ball about. He links things up really well and he's got a lovely weight of pass on him. But Bahram Kayal immediately comes on, and obviously, you know, it's circumstantial to an extent. It's the role he's been asked to play, but he bust a gut, steaming up and down the pitch, getting in people's faces, trying to make things happen in a way that perhaps Davey doesn't. So yeah, another year at the club for Bahram Kayal, and I think I can't imagine anyone's displeased about that.
No, I mean, since day one, really. In fact, he was Houghton's first signing, wasn't he? He's always put in top effort into every game. Just a real kind of classic box-to-box midfielder, really, and he hasn't always been first choice. And perhaps if he's happy with that role of not always starting, but being a really key member of the squad, definitely welcome an extra year of him, because he'll never really let you down. He's one of those kinds of players, really. He's a 100%er, I guess.
Well done for stopping at the 100, not going above that place that doesn't exist. So that good stuff. Again, the fact that players like him just want to stay is such a vindication of everything that we're doing. He says, "I'm one of the old boys of the dressing room now, and I'm happy to continue here at the club. I'm very pleased with the trust which the gaffer has given me, and I want to say thanks for that. There have been so many exciting times here, a few bad ones too with injuries, but that's history, and now I'm looking forward to helping the club achieve what they want to this season. My family and I really enjoy being here. Seeing the club reach the next level is unbelievable."
I think what I love about Kayal, and he was player of the season, wasn't he? Was it the year after he arrived? I think he might have actually got that accolade. I just love the fact that when he gets the ball at his feet, his head goes up and he's looking to progress the play, and that's no slight against Davey or Dale, who are two of my favourite players, but maybe the accusation has been made that they will often go sideways or be slightly more defensive, maybe in their progression up the pitch. Whereas I love Kayal. He's looking to move the ball forwards. He's looking to maybe take someone on, and that's great. Always great to see. Doesn't always work, but I do love that element of his game. So I'm personally, pleased to see that he's got another year.
Bit more of a dynamo. See how he fares at the City of Manchester today. One more news item, not specifically Albion related because we haven't played there for 27 years or something, but the sale of Wembley we've mentioned a couple of times. It looks like it's taken a step forward. £600 million sale being discussed now by the FA's board. It will be considered by 127-member FA Council on the 11th of October, with the views likely to impact on the board's final decision. I think my take on this before was it would seem odd now the FA not owning Wembley, but actually on a practical day-to-day basis in terms of visiting the stadium or using it, it probably wouldn't make any realistic difference to the fan experience. But I don't have strong feelings about we should own Wembley. I
think, the magic of Wembley has been diminished massively since it's been refurbished. I think the fact that, pretty much every game in the latter rounds of the FA Cup or whatever kind of tends to take place there has, you know, hugely diminished the attraction of getting to Wembley. You know, I think what was great about the refurb of Wembley for me was the fact that the England team went out on the road and played all around the country, and actually, you know, thinking about it, I'd love to see more of that, right? I mean, you know, who's to say we couldn't have them here? I know it's only 30,000, but you know, if it was a smaller game, then why not? And
we played a couple on the road recently, which have gone down very well as well.
Exactly. Was it Leicester, one of the last ones? So, yeah, I mean, for me, maybe those that are kind of clinging on to the kind of magic of Wembley, you know, I think personally that's gone for me a little bit, and. What will annoy me will be is if the FA sell it, and then, you know, the money that they get from it isn't then reinvested in a way that I would kind of see as a positive thing. I think if they were to make some statement that, I don't know, they were going to take £100 million of the sale and install 100 3G pitches around the country or something like that, something that had a real kind of community benefit, then I think that might make things a little bit more palatable. If that 600 million kind of then just disappears into an FA kind of black hole, then that's a little bit more disappointing. But no, I don't hold any great kind of romantic attachments, really.
How about you, Tom?
Exactly the same. I went there last season when we played Tottenham away. A slightly different experience with it being a club game. It's a big stadium. That's already there's no. I don't think there's anything particularly special about it. Yeah, like as we've said, if the money's reinvested correctly, and possibly quite a big if, great, because it's, you know, a good lump sum, and it will perhaps save the FA money in the long run, and get the England team on the road for certain games. You know, there's no reason why a home qualifier against, you know, Lithuania needs to be at Wembley when it could be a smaller stadium that's packed out. Yeah, I think long run, I think it's quite a good move actually, if the money's invested properly.
Yeah, of course we have played at Wembley. I'd completely erase that from my mind because I didn't consider the Tottenham away game to be a Wembley fixture. If you know, literally it was a Wembley fixture, but in my mind, we've played there twice. In our history, I guess, well, 3 times if you include the replay, and they were massive occasions. And anything.
Are you thinking of the playoff in '91?
91, exactly. Yeah. That was my one and only visit because, yeah. But speaking of Tottenham, that's who we played last week. One of the teams that is currently and has been historically considered one of the big clubs. They were on a little bit of a wobble when we went to play them, having lost a couple of games, 2 or 3 on the bounce. But yes, as expected, because everyone predicted that we'd give them a hard time, we didn't really give them a hard time until the latter stages of the game. Murray conceded a penalty on the 42nd minute. Really, Tottenham had absolutely bossed that first half anyway. Almost 80% possession, passing accuracy of 92%. It felt like we were barely playing, and it felt to me like it was only a matter of time. It was just a typical frustration that the goal we did concede to give them a penalty seemed wholly unnecessary. And in fact, I'm normally quite good at spotting handballs and things. We sit a long way back in the West Upper, but I felt I think this was one where I just couldn't see it because we were sort of almost completely in line with the wall. So it was hard to actually see that Murray had done what he did. Having watched it back, what was he thinking?
I don't know, Leon. I've got no answer there. I think I saw a kind of replay of it at half time, having kind of wondered what had happened. And yeah, it obviously his arm was very high, but also it actually looked like he'd moved it towards the ball as well. So it was a bit of an odd one. I've got no idea.
Yeah, I tweeted him. Obviously, he didn't reply, but I did say it rather looked like he was trying to protect Dishy Davy Proper's beautiful face.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, right. He's looking out for his mate. Okay.
Davy was going, not the face. He properly stretched for it. No arguments at all. I think it's probably one of those things where you, like, on every conscious level, he's thinking, don't do that. I think it was I think it was my girlfriend Tanya who was saying that, you know, sometimes if you say don't do this thing, don't do this thing, don't do this thing enough times, like your response is to actually do it. So I reckon he was standing there going, don't handball it, don't handball it. Oh.
I'd like to think with his experience that maybe doesn't have to have these internal monologues. But maybe he does. And I'm not surprised he hasn't had time to kind of tweet you this week, because he's been too busy trying to flog copies of FIFA 19, I think, hasn't he, if you've been following his Twitter feed?
Yeah, I have. I bought my copy before I saw that he was giving them away. Obviously, it's a low percentage anyway, and I'm not sure what format he's got them for. But yeah,
well, I'm sure you could have asked him,
Glenn, if you're out there. Yeah, I wouldn't mind, because I would like the Albion cover, which is quite nice. Anyway. Then one of the bigger stories after the game was another incident that, although I saw it was a bit of a melee and a skirmish, a couple of players went down in the box, and it did look rather suspect, but, you know, you just pass it off as one of those things. But Chris Hughton was absolutely right. Dunk was completely hauled to the floor. I'm not sure who had his shirt, actually, but it was a total... and I know it's one of those where people might say, oh, well, you know, if you give one of those, you've got to give 100. But this was particularly full-blown, you know, shirt wrapped in the fist and full weight of person dragged to floor. So I think it was a hard one not to give if it had been spotted.
Well, it would have been given in the World Cup, wouldn't it? How many of those did we see in the World Cup? But yes, I mean, possibly clutching at straws a little bit in terms of the actual overall performance in the game. I mean, I know we kind of slightly moved on from the first half, but I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts on what you thought the game plan was. Was it a case of let's just hang on and keep it a 0-0 for as long as possible? A little bit how we maybe tried to play against Liverpool, but that was an away game. You know, is it right to be doing that at home? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I must admit there was some grumbles from my folks that I sit with in the Upper West at half time. Particularly a couple of them were quite livid about our perceived kind of inactivity. You know, and I think I wasn't quite as livid, but certainly when I looked at that Spurs team and I looked at some of the passing that they were doing, I could kind of understand a little bit where Hughton was, what he was trying to do. I think if they had really clicked into gear and we had been playing a more attacking game and we had been trying to press them, and then I think they could have easily gone in 2 or 3-0 up. So, you know, just the quality in that side was pretty unbelievable. And then kind of look at the bench as well, and Ali was on the bench and Lamela was on the bench. So, you know, the quality was just, you know, insanely good, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that about today's game as well. But I can kind of see what Chris was trying to do, but it is a bit disappointing when you're at home to play that defensively, I guess.
Yeah, this is what we've been talking about for weeks, and I mean, again, as people who Paul travels a lot more than I do, as somebody who doesn't watch many of the away fixtures live and spend all the money and time getting there, it's perhaps easier for me to forgive some of the more negative away performances. But at home, yeah, it's like we know that we've gained many points at the Amex over the last few seasons, often against teams who, you know, are better than us on paper, or at least higher up the league, by treating the place as our fortress. And it is concerning that we do seem to be going into almost every game at the moment, just keep it tight, keep it solid, keep your shape, all that stuff. And I think maybe we are still in a transition period. There is this talk of playing a more pressing game, but we seem to have only done that in fits and starts. When we have done it, we've done it against Manchester United and beaten them. We did it at Liverpool in passages and gave them some trouble as well. But yeah, the first half against Tottenham, it just felt like we were just letting them have that match for themselves. And again, I don't know if it's a lack of communication or lack of understanding of the overall game plan, but it worries me that, again, that the players don't feel able to express themselves when they can. And at home, you've got your two wingers playing as auxiliary fullbacks. But then, you know, again, as we always say, I defer to Chris's superior knowledge. He probably would anticipate that instead of 1-0 down at half-time, if we'd gone for it, we might have been 2 or 3 down. And in fact, but for Matty Ryan, we could have ended up in that game 2 or 3 down. Harry Kane said himself that he felt like they should have put the game to bed. As it turned out, we actually ended up running them close. I mean, their second goal was just it's a nice high quality Premier League goal. If we hadn't already given them an easy penalty, it wouldn't have seemed like such a killer blow. But as it turned out, that was when things really got going for us. But too late. And I've seen some people saying that Tottenham pretty much switched off at 2-0, and that was why we were allowed to get back into it. But Knockaert started to run the show. Should have equalised. Wonderful move. Just fluffed his lines. Just didn't connect with the shot.
He tried to do it all too quick. He probably could have actually just looked up and gone either side of the keeper. But it was a beautiful move and a lovely skill from him. But he tried to do the kind of drag past the defender and the shot all in one movement, and maybe could have just put his head up. But any other day, if that goes in, you're talking about a cracking goal. And I think Knockaert had a great game. Was he man of the match? Was he? Or I can't remember. But he was looking to attack. He was looking to kind of get forward. So he created a fair amount of stuff, I think, for us on the positive side of things. And then obviously at the end scores a kind of cracking goal, and then has a chance to possibly do better. Which I think would have been possibly a little bit of daylight robbery from a Spurs perspective, but I certainly would have taken it.
Yeah, it was. It was one of those. I don't think anyone could quite believe we were getting another chance, because he scored in 90 plus 3. I think the referee had added 4, which I think was about right. Obviously, that's a minimum of, and we'd scored, so there could have been another 30 seconds. But I think, again, he kind of snatched at it a bit and didn't put his foot through it, which is a shame, because the one he did score was such a glorious finish. It's the sort of goal, if it had been the one to put us a goal up or to win us a game, it would be remembered as a classic Albion Amex goal. But as it is, it was a consolation, as it turned out. So yeah, it was a weird game, because it felt strange to me, and it felt at one point like we were, well, for the most of the first half, like we were destined to lose heavily and just never really be in it. And then at the very death, I was kind of, felt a little stunned and bewildered that we've come that close to a 2-2 draw on a point.
I just wonder, and again, complete speculation, but if Chris has looked at the first 7 or 8 games of the season and identified the fact that, we've got Liverpool and Man City and Spurs and Man United, and I wonder if his plan for the first couple of months of the season kind of reflects a certain style of playing to counteract those games, and that once those games are kind of finished, and I know they're going to come around again, but maybe he'll kind of unleash the hounds a little bit more. Maybe he'll take the brakes off. Maybe he's got them playing in a slightly more defensive, attritional way for the first few games of the season, in order to kind of try and counteract heavy defeats. And I just wonder if we'll see a slightly different approach to the games that we got coming up. Pure speculation, but just wondered.
I like the sound of that. All right, we'll take a break. You're listening to the Albion Mag Radio Show on 101.4 FM, DAB Digital, and online wherever you are. My name's Leon. I'm joined here with Paul and Tom. We're talking Brighton and Hove Albion. We've already caught up with the Tottenham game and its oddness, another defeat, but we're still sitting relatively pretty in the league. I suppose I have some concerns that people are already writing off certain teams as being definites for relegation, as if last year didn't happen. Like I've already had people saying, well, there's only one relegation slot up for grabs because Huddersfield and Cardiff are gone. I just don't think we can make those kind of assumptions at this stage. That seems like a very dangerous game to play.
Definitely. If you look at Crystal Palace last season, they looked dead and buried. 7 games in. They looked absolutely destitute, and then they ended up finishing kind of mid-table. All it takes is a manager change, a good couple of signings in January, and you can turn it around. We're in a kind of mini league of 10 teams or so. Any of those 10 teams can be in that bottom 3. It's definitely dangerous thinking, I think.
Yeah, by all means, if those teams want to carry on losing and losing heavily for, say, another 2 or 3 months, I'm very, very happy for them to do so. But there's absolutely there's no guarantees, and it's not something that Houghton or anyone at the club will be relying on, because you got to make your own. Yeah, we still got to aim for that 40-point mark, and regardless of what happens, and even if there is only one relegation slot up for grabs, that's 100% the amount of relegation slots needed for us to go down. So not necessarily even that much of a safety blanket. One post on North Stand chat that I wanted to share. I hope the poster doesn't mind. Napier's knee. I thought this was worth discussion. Before the season began, Houghton and I think Stevens gave interviews in which they warned against complacency. When Balogun stepped in for Dunk, it was hard to spot the difference. If anything, Balogun was actually better. But as soon as Dunk approaches fitness again, he is straight back in the team. This must create complacency among some players. They know they will be picked. This is what disappointed me most. We've got some World Cup players in the squad, and they are not yet trusted over players who are either falling short of last year's standards or will never ever get anywhere near close to an international squad. I know they have to be integrated into the squad, but a number of other teams seem to have done that well enough with bigger player turnover than us. The club is beginning to outstrip the team, and that's a bit worrying. Any thoughts on that, Paul?
I don't think that just because you play for Iran at a World Cup or Nigeria at a World Cup, that gives you carte blanche to kind of go straight into your club team, right? So, I don't know if Trinidad and Tobago are at the World Cup this year, but does that automatically mean that anyone who plays for them should come straight into? No, I don't think I agree really with much of that. I think that Lewis Dunk is far and away the best centre-back at the football club and should be first name on the team sheet when fit. Not taking anything away from Balogun, he looked great when he came in, but Lewis Dunk is superb. Maybe had a bit of a wobble when he came back from his injury, but I don't think anything significant enough. There definitely seems to be a prevailing feeling that when you spend 10 million, 15 million, 20 million pounds on a player, they automatically have to go straight into the team. I said it at the top of the show that Chris is got a squad of 25, and just because he's paid 20 million pounds for someone, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to start. All those players will play a role as the season goes on, and I think that maybe on paper, like Johan Batch has got more of a case for starting over Solly March than Balogun has over Lewis Dunk. Sorry, that's my opinion there.
Shot down. Sorry, Napier's knee, if you listen. But on the subject of changing the team, making changes, Tom, I think we can hear from our final results on the Twitter poll this week.
Yeah, we can. So again, we were asking about today's game. Would you like to see us rest some players or go full strength and give Man City our best shot? The results are in, polling's closed, overwhelmingly in favour of going full strength, 88%. Brighton fans are up for having a good old go at Man City. They'll be easy when they're not that good.
Well, let's get into it. Shout out to anyone who's listening to us on the road, who's already on their way to the stadium for the 3:00 kickoff this afternoon. May you have a safe journey there and back, and something to celebrate during the couple of hours after 3:00 and beyond, hopefully. So we know that Pascal and Dale Stevens are out with ankle and hamstring problems. Jose Izquierdo stepped up his fitness by playing half of an under-23 game on Monday, but I'm sure it's too soon for him to step back in the team, but I suppose he might be on the bench. Andone awaits his debut, having been on the bench last weekend on his return from the groin injury. Man City look set to rotate their squad ahead of the Champions League next week, so shouldn't be much of a problem then. They've got Riyad Mahrez in line to start after scoring twice as a substitute against Cardiff. But on the plus side, De Bruyne's out, along with Mendy, Mangala and Claudio Bravo, all still injured. So we said before the show, how do we even talk about previewing this game beyond, because we think we know what we're going to do, that I'm sure Chris will find the Twitter poll very useful information. It's a binding poll, so he won't make any changes. 88-12, a bit more of a margin than we're used to in these things. What can he do? What will he do that's any different to keeping it tight, keep your shape, don't do anything silly, try to get into half-time at 0-0, yada, 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 try not to come away getting absolutely battered?
I think this could be a short segment, Leon, because I'm not entirely sure, but I think the model is what we did at Anfield earlier in the season, and that seemed to work to a degree. That was much better than the mauling we got there when we were last there in May. So, that will be the model. Obviously, he is a little bit depleted because he doesn't have one of his key players to playing in that model, and that's Dale Stephens, right? So, I think that will weaken us a little bit in terms of trying to hold back the kind of the sea there, the blue sea of midfielders kind of constantly charging at us. I can't profess to watching City a lot when they're not playing against us or whatever, but they do look sometimes when they are on song like they are playing a different sport. It is quite insane to watch the speed, the precision at which they play football, and I think it's unrecognisable sometimes to the kind of stuff that maybe we've been used to over the years. So if they're on song, I don't know how you stop it. I don't know how you keep it even to kind of 3-0, right? What I have read about this season is they lost in the Champions League, didn't they, at home? I think was it Lyon or to Lyon? And from what I understand of that game, there was a degree of complacency in the team. And I think, to be honest with you, that's all we can hope for, is that somehow that complacency creeps back in and, allows some strange result to kind of happen. But I don't offer much hope, I'm afraid.
I remember years ago, Paul, you used to, long before they got their billions of, shake money, you used to despise Manchester City. Do you still have that personal loathing of them?
Did I? I think I think that... Was that possibly when they kind of came down to the third division? And, I think at the time, being a Brighton fan, I was just very pleased to see a perceived big gun kind of on their knees. Having been through what, we'd been through, I just loved the fact that, they were playing at Macclesfield and places like that, the kind of places where we were. So I'm not sure that hatred has kind of continued. It's kind of similar to how I feel about teams like Leeds and teams like that. It's just good to see these kind of clubs who have a certain degree of football owes them top flight football entitlement. Yeah, it's always good to see those clubs suffering a little bit.
Love it. Brighton have never won at Man City in 8 attempts, drawn 2 and lost 6, and that was before they were as good as they are now, by and large. Our last win was a 2-1 home victory in the second tier in April '89. I don't think I was at that one.
Was that the Keith Cuss heading the ball into the
Keith Cuss heading the ball backwards and getting the sack? Yeah, head ball boy, possibly so. Yeah. We are without an away league victory in 16 matches since last November. That's almost a year. We won 1-0 at Swansea, who were terrible.
I saw most of those as well.
Yes. Lucky you. We failed to score in 11 of those, and we've yet to keep a clean sheet this season. Celebrity predictions include Jeff Stelling 3-0, Paul Merson 2-0, Charlie Nicholas 4-0, Class of 92 3-0, Mark Lawrenson 3-0, and Carl Pilkington from off the telly 4-1. Paul, prediction?
I've gone for a conservative estimate in my predictions league of 3-0, so I'll stick with that.
Tom?
I'm going to be really ambitious and go for a 2-0 loss.
I should make it clear that when I say 3-0, I mean to Man City as well.
Yeah. I've gone 4-0 to Manchester City. I'm sorry, everybody. I was at the women's game last week. Our third attempt at the top flight of the women's game this season. Anyway, sadly, another 0-1 defeat, the third in a row since being accepted into the top tier. Hope Powell said, I thought football-wise we were better. We kept the ball better, passed it better, did all those things better, apart from obviously stopping them scoring and scoring at the other end. It's hard for us. The girls feel they were the better team, so it's a hard one to take, but they have to take it. We had 57% of the ball. We had more shots, both on goal and on target. We had 5 corners to 1. I was there. The first sort of 2/3 of the game were played in pretty horrific cold, wet conditions. Obviously, it was the same for both sides, but we did our best to control the game. Definitely could see the standard, the the increase in standard compared to previous times I've watched the Albion women. But it definitely looked like a team that's still bedding in a number of new signings. And Liverpool actually going into that game hadn't won a game either. I think they were actually below us, but I think I don't know what their history as a women's outfit is like, but I imagine they've got some decent players to pick from up there. So I don't know if they're expected to be in the lower echelons. But yeah, we absolutely had chances to take the lead, and much like the senior men's team, we had chances to equalise at the end. So yeah, really frustrating. Pleasant afternoon. Enjoyed the retro concession stand. Very much a throwback with instant coffee and urn tea and the smell of fried food blending in with the rain. It was quite nostalgic. But yeah, hopefully better things to come, I think, from the women's side. Meanwhile, the under-23 men are going great guns still. Another point after a draw with Leicester City, 2-2. Drea opened the scoring before Callum Wright and Hugo Cato own goal put Leicester ahead. But then the amazing man, Aaron Connolly, fires a late equaliser for the Seagulls. Brighton now unbeaten, sitting in fifth after 6 matches, just 1 point off the top, which all 4 of them are tied on 11 points. It's exciting times.
Certainly is, and I think this is one of the things that obviously Ashworth will look at when he comes in, is how we work to get a few of these players through into Chris's first team squad. But yeah, really exciting. I saw an interesting debate on everybody's favourite Albion forum during the week about Connolly. So as I understand it, he's not big in stature, and there was a good debate about how that will possibly hold him back or not hold him back, and Messi's only 5'8", and all of these kind of things. So I must admit, I haven't seen Connolly play more than a couple of times, but he looks sharp. But taking into account the way that the first team plays football at the moment, with Murray obviously being a key to that, it'll be interesting to see where he might get a game. I guess now with the Caribou Cup, we're kind of don't have necessarily the opportunity to maybe bring some of these guys in. Maybe if we get a lesser team in the third round of the FA Cup, we might see him get a start. But yeah, really, really excited to maybe see some of these players come through.
Obviously, since we brought Gross in, it has changed the game somewhat from when we were playing with Baldock up front with a more traditional striker. So I think it's not that it's completely out of Houghton's mindset to play potentially a smaller striker off a bigger striker in certain games and situations. But obviously, Gross has been such an integral part of all of our positive results. I saw somebody on Twitter call him out as a fraud. Pascal Gross is a fraud. This was a Brighton fan. I was like, I mean, it beggars belief. I know social media and all that, but I can't even imagine how, even just if you just go objectively by statistical contribution, like there's absolutely no, I don't know, it's a very strange world.
What were they calling him out for being a fraud for?
Just not being very good.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, it was like, because he'd had a couple of games where he hadn't actually assisted or scored a goal. Yeah. So he's a fraud, yeah. Maybe it's because he doesn't turn up away from home. Maybe they consider him a bit of a luxury.
And he really doesn't. I mean, his away from home form, for me as a travelling fan last season, was a bit of a frustration. Yeah.
That doesn't make him a fraud.
No, it doesn't.
No. Dennis Bergkamp was a fraud by that token. He literally didn't turn up away from home. We must go through our local non-league teams. Exciting times in the Bostik League Premier sides. Having, as we know, we've got 5 of our local representatives in that league. Some of them are playing each other this week as well. And we've got some FA Cup results. Dean will be pleased. For about most of them, I think Worthing, who are in second in the Bostik Premier, came through their FA Cup tie away at Chelmsford 2-1 thanks to a James Crane brace. They play 17th placed Leatherhead at the Bibby Financial Services Stadium today, and then Lewis at the Dripping Pan on Wednesday in a bit of a local derby. Lots of those this season. Bognor Regis Town, who are 4th, drew 1-1 at Sudbury in the Cup before going down 3-2 in the replay on Tuesday. They really do turn around those replays in the early rounds of the Cup very rapidly. They travel to 11th placed Potters Bar today and then face Burgess Hill at Nywood Lane this Tuesday. 9th placed White Hawk beat Essex's East Thurrock United 3-2 in the FA Cup, with Jason Williams' second goal deciding the tie 12 minutes from time. They take on 18th placed Kingstonian at home this afternoon before travelling to Dorking on Tuesday evening. Lewis, who are 10th, currently knocked Hertfordshire's Kings Langley out of the FA Cup on Wednesday with a 2-1 replay win following Saturday's 1-1 stalemate. 15th placed Wingate and Finchley play host to the Rooks at 3 p.m. today before that visit from Worthing in midweek. Burgess Hill Town in 22nd. Hampton and Richmond Borough dumped struggling Burgess Hill out of the FA Cup in a 3-0 win for the Hampton and Richmond Borough side last weekend. A visit from unbeaten AFC Hornchurch is today's test before that trip to Bognor on Tuesday. And don't forget, the best goals of Sussex football are shown on YouTube from 8 p.m. every Monday night. Search YouTube for the Sussex Football Show. Don't know who's hosting that while Dean's away. I don't get that gig. So yeah, good stuff. Certainly some games potentially worth attending this midweek. Albion not playing until Friday against West Ham. Actually, we're thinking about it. We should have done a preview for that game. Here we are, a couple of minutes from the end. Obviously, I suppose our thoughts on that one might change depending on how West Ham do today, how we do today, whether we come through, what the injury team news is. But right now, I'm thinking it's a very targetable 3 points, and I'd like to see us give them a much tougher time than we gave Tottenham in the first half.
I think it looks like West Ham has started to get a little bit better in the last couple of games, so that's obviously a slight concern, and like I said earlier in the show, I wonder if we'll start to see Chris play a little bit more freely at home. I think it could be a really good game, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 home win.
Beautiful. I'd like to see Izquierdo come back and get have another cracking game against West Ham. You looking forward to this one, Tom?
I am. Also, potentially Glenn Murray's 100th goal. If he's on 98 at the moment, if he bags a couple. Izquierdo needs to come back and score his annual screamer against West Ham. I think they must hate him, but yeah. A few weeks ago, I would have said very winnable. Now, as you said, West Ham are slightly improving, so it'd be tight. But they're the kind of games that we need to look at as we need to be targeting a win in those types of games against teams in the bottom half of the table, which I would say West Ham will be. 2-1 I'll go with.
Me also. And I think absolutely West Ham are one of those teams where there's a lot of the media as well as their fans, there's a lot of sort of divine right to be in the top flight, but actually West Ham have been a yo-yo club for decades, really. Like they spend fairly lengthy periods in the top flight, but they've been down multiple times in our football watching lifetime. So it's not a team that we should. I know they're a London club and they've got a lovely history and all that, but they're not somebody that you should just fear the name of West Ham. So bring it on. Well, that's just about it from the Albion Mag Radio Show this week. I've been Leon, been joined by Paul. See you again soon, Paul.
Thanks, Leon. See you soon.
And social media guru Tom.
Goodbye, have a good week.